Monday, August 22nd. You are to read Isaiah 7 through 10, Psalm 22, and Matthew 26. So, in Isaiah 7, Ahaz was king of Judah, and he and his people were starting to worry about some alliances being formed to go up against Jerusalem, but God told Ahaz through Isaiah that the plans to harm Judah would not happen. And in verse 10 of chapter 7, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, "Ask the Lord your God for a sign, whether in the deepest depths or in the highest heights." Now, apparently, Ahaz thought this was a trick or something, because even though God told him to, Ahaz said, "I will not ask. I will not put the Lord to the test." This little section seems to me like an issue of overcomplicating righteousness, because it's like Ahaz is trying to come off as ultra holy when he should have just done what God said. Isaiah even said Ahaz was trying God's patience. Yikes. So to paraphrase a prophecy that sounds a lot like that of Jesus' birth, Isaiah says that the nations and people Ahaz is worried about will be gone by the time an unborn baby there is old enough to know right from wrong. And the Lord will bring the king of Assyria. Through chapters 8 and 9, we read more of God's urging that Ahaz and his people should not fear nations or other people, but should fear God with a much deeper respect. And in talking about the light and freedom that God brings, there's another passage connected to Jesus in Isaiah 9, verses 6 through 7, that says, "For to us a child is born. He will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end." This is a joyful thing, of course, but it's followed by explanations of God's anger against Israel. In these readings, we learn that God used the king of Assyria to enact his anger against those who anger him. But we also learn in 10:7 that while God was using that king, he had dishonorable motives to destroy. So verse 12 says, "When the Lord has finished all his work against Mount Zion and Jerusalem, he will say, I will punish the king of Assyria for the willful pride of his heart." And this is another reminder that ungodly people can be used to carry out God's will, but it doesn't mean that they won't have to pay for their sinful choices in the end. Switching gears to Psalm 22, you may recognize some of these words and think, am I in the wrong passage? Didn't Jesus say this? Didn't this happen to him? You're right about the connection there. In fact, the opening line, my God, why have you forsaken me?" is in the Gospels as the words of Jesus from the cross. But because he was alluding to Psalm 22, we see in the following verses that he hasn't really given up faith in God's follow-through. It still tells of God's faithfulness and says in verse 24, "He has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help." And so we know God still works in dark times, especially in passages like Matthew 26. And it starts with the plot against Jesus and tells us of the betrayal of Judas and the prediction and fulfillment of Peter's denial of Jesus. All this is a time of heavy emotions for Jesus, but in his prayer at Gethsemane, one of my favorite passages in the Bible, before his arrest, he still prays for God's will, even though it means his own suffering. Now, I hope these words from God and these readings are challenging to you, and I hope that you continue to work through the lessons that God wants to teach you in these. And from these passages specifically, I want to urge you to remember to trust that God is in control. Do what he says, and have faith that he is more than able to keep his promises and provide exactly what is needed. So until next time, church, you are sent.